The views and opinions on the Craig L. Hayes Show do not necessarily reflect those of Westgate Resorts, ownership, or management. And now, on with the show.
Extra, extra, read all about it. Get your copies while they last. Stop the presses.
And now for something completely different.
There's no business like show business. Are we not entertained? Prepare yourself for a little sensory overload. Stand by to roll show intro. Roll show intro in 3, 2, 1, go.
It's showtime! The Craig L. Hayes Show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome, family, friends, and listeners all around this planet we call home. This is it's showtime, the Craig L. Hayes Show. Welcome to the show. It's the 22nd. Am I right? Yeah, 22nd of February, 2026. And we're coming to you recording from the Westgate Resort, Las Vegas, in the International Showroom in Elvis Presley's dressing room here in the basement. And we're going to continue our series that we record from here on people who are in the industry, who've worked in the industry for many years, and all the different aspects of show business that they've been involved in, and they're going to tell their story, their life story, a little bit about where they came from, how they got into show business, and then what they did here. Today's guest is somebody I've known since 1994 when he was the head audio here at what was then the Las Vegas Hilton. And before I do that, I got to take care of some business here. I got to thank a few people for allowing us to do this show from here and supporting us. Cammie Christensen, she's the president of the hotel, and she's been a supporter in us doing this show that keeps history alive. Dawn Rawls, she's the vice president of entertainment and marketing, and John Peer, technical director of all entertainment. Thank you, everybody, for letting us to continue to do this historical, I don't know what you call it, expose on entertainment in this room and around town and other parts of the country. Anyways, we'll get back to who I'm going to introduce you to in just a second here. And he was the head audio here. When I first came over, he was actually here before I was by probably about 8 months or so, maybe a little bit more. And but I've always admired his professionalism when he was here on how he took care of every little aspect of audio and how intense he was in making sure that the audio was always up and perfect every show, no matter what the show was. And I admired him back then on his work ethic and his abilities. And today I've got him in here after almost over 30 years now of knowing him. And his name is Ed Johnson. Ed, welcome to the show.
Oh, well, thank you, Craig, and thanks for the nice introduction. And it's actually, I think, 33 years if you go by when I joined the Union Hall would have been when I started this job.
Yeah, I came here in July of '94, and the show had opened in January, so that was, 7 months there. But then the load-in, I wasn't here for the load-in, so.
Neither was I. I ended up squeaking in when they were doing rehearsals, and they had some issues with some of their technical problems. And at the time, I was working up in Hotel Sound with a gentleman named Ed Cushman, who I had been doing broadcasting stuff, doing fights and such. And he brought me in knowing that when the showroom opened that they were going to have issues, and he didn't want to fix them. So he called me in to go down and attack that. And boy, I just walked right in here and knew all the gear really well at that time and just took over. And it was a matter of time. I think my first problem they had down here was an intercom issue, and they put me up in the spotlight booth for the next 2 weeks where I just sat there and watched the show. And if there was an issue, I was to go into action. And then eventually the gentleman who left, Bud Wolf, who was head sound here, he left because he didn't want to have a production engineer mix over him, but he still was a very fine engineer, so he went on his way to do other things. But there was another guy named Terry, I don't remember his last name, that they brought in, and he had done the install and was going to be the new head sound, but for some reason he just didn't show up to work for 2 weeks. And I'm not sure what the reasoning for that was, other than maybe, well, I don't know, maybe drug related or something to that effect. But regardless to that, he disappeared, and at that point they were looking for someone, and I knew Steve Ripka he used to buy gear from me when I used to work at an audio shop here years ago at Burns Audio. And I handed him my resume, and boom, I was in. And then I just started working here, and yeah, it was a really fun time.
Good. Before we get into any more of that, I'd like to see you to tell us a little bit about where you came from. Where'd you grow up? Where were you born, grow up? Where'd you go to school? Did you take anything like AV in school, or stuff like that? And then what was the transition from pre-show business into the land of show business that we all live in?
So I've actually lived a very blessed life when it comes to that. When I was a youngster, I grew up in Van Nuys, California. And my mom had me born in Hollywood, California, because she thought it would make a difference and get me into this kind of business or make me a star. Well, in a roundabout way, I guess it worked.
I guess it did, didn't it?
Because when I was a youngster, probably in third grade, I was, was not a very good student, has dyslexia, but I could sing, and I had a beautiful, beautiful soprano voice. And there was a choir, a boys' choir, California Boys Choir, which was an elite boys choir in Los Angeles. So we met down by USC, down at the exhibition park at the museums there. Anyway, my principal, Mr. Drake, actually got me. He saw that I had singing ability and probably recognized that I wasn't going to go far in school. So he recognized me, and for the first 3 months drove me all the way from Van Nuys all the way down to USC, which is quite a long drive, just to get me involved with the choir. And then, of course, after about a month or two, he stopped driving me, and my parents didn't really pick it up. But it was the next year when the choir came back and performed at our school again, and I had tried out again, and I was accepted. My parents let me go, and my parents figured out a way to take me down there. So when I was in the choir from, I think it was 73 through to like 77, I was a lead soprano. I sang in the Hollywood Bowl. I sang with the New York City Opera Company, the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, the Greek Theater, did several tours on multiple albums, a group called Angel. White Hot was the album, Whiskey and Lace by Alice Cooper, and several Salvation Army albums, as well as I was the lead soloist on the Mary Tyler Moore Christmas special that she had. I sang the Hallelujah chorus. Anyway, that's how I started, and it was really back then when I was a singer that I realized I loved music and I loved audio. It's just in my soul. So I saw when we did Alice Cooper's Whiskey and Lace album, I saw them smoking cigarettes, drinking beer in there behind the glass as we were recording our part to be on the album. And I realized that's the job I want. Well, look at them. They just hang out, smoke cigarettes, drink beer, and turn it up, turn it down. That's what I thought anyway. So that's kind of how it all started for me. It wasn't till later in life, after I got through high school and finally did graduate, that I finally had decided to take recording engineering classes. And I took a couple classes in Burbank area. The place was called Sound Masters, and they taught recording engineering and also live sound. They had one small course that was live sound that I took. And it's kind of funny, once again, how I get involved in things because I'm a go-getter. I never finished my courses at that school. There were 6 courses. I took 5 of them, and I took that live sound course. And I started dating the secretary at the school, this young girl, and she told me about where they do job placement for the school once you get done. And I saw that advertisement in the newspaper, and I decided, heck, I'm going to go down there and just sell myself. So I went down for an interview with a gentleman named Don Blanton, who was in charge of, at the time, Sitmar Cruises, hiring all the technical staff, DJs and audio people for that. I sat in that room from 7 o'clock in the morning till 6 p.m., and everyone got an interview. All 12 people got an interview except me. I sat there another hour, and finally he interviewed me, and I just sold myself as I can do whatever. I'm a good people person. I love what I'm doing. I can DJ, which I really hadn't been able to DJ. I hadn't really DJed other than having my own nice sound systems and synthesizers and stuff that I was interested at home. And he referred me to a gentleman that he used that was a DJ, and I went on my own dime down to Palm Springs and DJ'd for the first time. I set everything up, but I really didn't know how to mix the beats, so he kind of showed me and told me to keep my mouth shut. It was a small party for probably about 30 people for Christmas time. And after that, I went back home, and then the next thing I know, I got a call to go work on the cruise ship. And when I arrived at the cruise ship, it was interesting, as that when I arrived on the cruise ship, the gentleman who was the head sound engineer wasn't doing a good job on the cruise ship. He had been doing the DJ position, and the guy who was really the DJ had taken over the head sound position. So it was a unique situation for me the first day on the cruise ship that the cruise director pulled me in and said, okay, Bill here is supposed to be our head soundman, but he's really the DJ, and the guy who was our DJ just left his contract, and we understand you know how to mix a little bit. And I said, okay, well, let's make a rule here. If I will try and mix the shows and do my thing for you guys, but if I don't succeed, I think you should let Bill go and I can take over the DJ positions. Well, the way it worked out is that was the beginning of my career. I started mixing on the cruise ship, and I did that for 3 8-month contracts. And after I did that, I was very fortunate that at that time, my brother-in-law, Dan Andreessen, was in the Union 695 as a head utility for a lot of award shows, a lot of Grammys, American Music Awards, People's Choice, Academy Awards, you name it. All the top stuff he did, he just had been in the union that long. He introduced me to a gentleman named Bruce Burns, who owned a company called Burns Audio. And Burns Audio was my first experience working real shows, really big shows, super large shows, high stressful shows, like I explained, Academy Awards and all those shows. I was a driver and a tech running cables, but really a sponge, and I did well there, and they ended up letting me mix shows for Disneyland, and I took over that stuff, but I was never going to be able to take over the Academy Awards or any of those big shows. The guys that were doing that were the top in their field and still are today. Yep. Some of them are still out there doing it. So he had opened an office in Las Vegas, and when I got married, I decided it was a good time to get away from my friends, my family, and just start a new life with my wife. And so we moved to Las Vegas. And when we moved to Las Vegas, I ran the office for Burns Audio for about 1.5 years and met several different audio engineers, Mark Ogenfelds, and different people that worked with me, and a gentleman named Packy Brown. Packy Brown was a payroller for the union for a large amounts of broadcast stuff, from Jerry Lewis Telethon to HBO Fights, et cetera, et cetera. Anything that was television related that was recorded in this town in Las Vegas back in those days, Packy Brown was pretty much the payroller for that.
Yep, I remember him. Yep.
So Packy shared an office with us there at Burns Audio, and eventually things kind of went south with Burns Audio, meaning that the company had ran into some financial situations and the way the business works, and they closed the office out here, and I moved back to LA for about 6 months before I was eventually laid off. And at that point, I said to my wife, let's go back to Vegas. I think I can make a career there. I knew nobody other than Packy Brown. I just had a feeling in my gut that that was where I needed to go. And so we did that. And I did end up talking to Packy, and he started putting me on fights back in those days, back in the, I want to say late 80s, early 90s, like 87, 88, 89, maybe it was 89, 90. There was a lot of fights happening in here.
Big fights, yeah.
You know, Thomas and Mack, all the different arenas, doing all these boxing matches. And so I became an A2 to the truck. Ed Cushman, as I mentioned earlier in my talk, was also the head soundman here at the Hilton, but what his head sound position was in charge of all the speakers throughout the entire hotel, such as the sports book, Benihana's, anything that made noise other than the showroom was his responsibility. So he knew that they were loading in this new show called Starlight Express. And after working with him for probably about a year and a half maybe, he recommended to me, I'm going to call you in. The hall's going to call you. I'm going to call you in, and you're going to come work with me for a little bit, because when they start having issues down there, and I have a feeling they're going to, I would rather send you down there. You're very adept to all the new gear that's out there, being the young man I was, having all the experience with that same gear at Burns Audio, setting it up, running it, doing my stuff. So that's kind of how I got here at the Hilton. It was interesting in those days, because I came in when they had some intercom problems. I went and fixed them, and they were like, "Who are you?" And I told them my name, and they said, "Go hang out in the spot booth for the next 2 weeks. Watch the shows. If we have any more problems, you'll come down." And I want to say the first show I came down here was the last rehearsal before they were opening the doors. So, but that first 2 weeks of shows when they opened the doors was me just sitting up in the spot booth watching the guys work. So that's how that started. And eventually, as I kind of said earlier, the gentleman who was head sound here before me, Bud Wolf, he was leaving to go do his own adventures and other audio gigs that he wanted to do. He wanted to mix. He didn't want to be babysitting a new production mixer that was coming in with Starlight Express being a huge Broadway show. They had their own Broadway mixer and head of departments for lighting and all the different departments.
Yeah.
So anyway, I came in, and they knew that I knew the gear. I passed my resume on to the technical director, Mr. Steve Ripka at the time, and boom, I was in. As I say, it's a funny story, because I want to say here a few years ago, I think I have 34 years in the Union Hall, and when I got my 30-year pin, I went down to go get it, and one of my former employees that worked with me, Bill Remar, who I still keep in contact with here in Vegas, I said to him, "Why don't you come down with me and let's get our 30-year pins?" And he called up the hall, and they said, "You can't get your 30-year pin in January, Ed, or Bill. You're going to have to wait till, I think it was April or March." So I was like, what was that about? And I come to realize that when I joined this Union Hall, I came in as the head sound right into the Hilton, and I was doing rehearsals, so I never got to go down to the hall and be sworn in or anything like that. And they didn't know what date to put me in, so I guess they put me in the date the show started. So Bill waited. I went down with Bill when he finally did get his pin. But those were fun years running the Hilton here. We had a really advanced system for its day. Back in '93, we had the first 32 multi-frequency changeable RF microphone system. We had 98 amplifiers running an IQ, which was an early version of digital control on a computer of all those amplifiers spread out all over this venue. We had rear speakers, we had front speakers, we were using LCS programs for automation for controlling microphones, as well as moving sound throughout the theater and doing panoramic stuff and moving stuff all around. So it was a very advanced theater, and it required a lot of attention and to detail to keep it up and make it happen. I made a lot of good friends, like Craig, yourself, and many other people that I know in this Union Hall. And besides that, that's kind of where it all started for me. And at some point, I think when Starlight Express ended, my career ended here too. So we won't really go into that, but it did. And when it did, I went on the bounce. I started bouncing. And well, actually, the first gig that I got once I got let loose here is that I ended up going over to the Celebrity Theater over at Bally's, and I ran it for about 2 months until they told me, "We really like you, we want to hire you, but we can't because you were fired at the Hilton." And they were a subsidiary of the Hilton at that point, and they said, "We can't use you because you have a letter of no rehire over at the Hilton." So I went on the bounce, and when I went on the bounce, I was doing odd jobs over at the Desert Inn. I was doing jobs at Caesars. I was doing jobs at all the big hotels here in town as an audio assistant. Met a lot of friends, Dave Niles over at the Desert Inn. I used to do a lot of stuff with them, and him and Rick, I can't think of his last name. Anyway, and Dave Torty, who was the head sound over at Caesars. Dave Torty liked me so much that he actually brought me in as a third audio assistant when I worked over there for probably about a year or so, till I finally decided, I like being my own boss. I like doing my own things. Just being an audio assistant wasn't going to be good enough for me. I wanted to mix.
Yep.
So I started taking bounce calls, and I ran into Freeman AV at the time. They're called AVW originally, and then they became AVW Freeman, and they became Freeman. But they were a big company doing large convention work here in town. And they were just like, when they found me, they were like, "Where did you come from?" It was an open call to some A&W root beer show or something like that. And they were just like, "Oh my goodness." And you know everything about all this stuff, which at least at that time I was pretty good at what I was doing. And so that started off to being a very long career working with them, traveling, doing 20 years of being the head soundman at NAB radio show in the general session, to the point where John David, I believe the NAB president of radio, liked me so much that we changed hands about 5 different companies over the course of the 20 years. And the 2 people that always stuck with the show was myself and the teleprompter lady. So that's a pretty good run there.
That's not bad at all.
No, and then that turned into, while I was doing that, some of my old friends that I used to work with at Burns Audio, a gentleman named Mark Oakenfelds, was like, "Hey, I got some gigs I'd like to get you involved in. I think you'd be perfect at snowboarding down the mountain and checking my speakers." And I was an avid snowboarder, so I was like,
I do remember that about you. Yeah, you used to love going snowboarding.
So I was like, really? I can have a job getting paid to snowboard? So I started working X Games with him, summer and winter X Games, and another show called Great Outdoor Games back with ESPN. Mark and I were a really good team. We did several tours with Doc Severinsen, where I mixed monitors one time, and then he moved to monitors and I took over front of house. And that was always a fun time, going out for, a month or two. Doc wouldn't like to go out very long. I think it was 2 months tour across the country, and we did it twice. But that was a fantastic time for me. Kind of realized that I didn't really like doing the touring thing where I was out that long. I really liked the doing 1 week show kind of thing, and seeing new venues, new places. X Games worked out for me. Eventually, at some point, my friend Mark has MS, and that deterred him from, or I wouldn't say deterred him, made it so that my employers didn't want to keep using him due to it was really difficult for him to get in and out of the areas for mixing. I mean, they were all open to helping and making that move forward, but there came a time when that didn't work. And when they did, they asked me if I'd be interested in doing it. And I agreed and said sure. And when I first took over that show, it was so complicated on the intercom side. Everybody had 32 channels of intercom, not just 2. So I didn't take over the intercom directly. I took over the audio, and I used one of the guys that was working with me, Rick Eichenberg, out of Denver, to take over the intercom side. And I was still called the audio designer, but I would use Rick would tell me what I needed to get, and I would make sure we got the right gear, and then Rick would run the intercom and I'd run the audio. Well, after about 3 years of that, Rick decided he saw that I wasn't going to give up the show. He didn't want to be my assistant. He said, "You're going to need to take it all over." And that's when I learned a little bit more about what he was doing there. We were using Riedel systems. I was using those for transporting audio on fiber way before Dante it came around. Matter of fact, probably 6 years before Dante digital systems started being developed for shipping audio, because at X Games things were, oh my gosh, anywhere from 15,000 feet to a quarter of a mile away from each other, and we needed to connect those things up.
Okay.
We used to do it on copper, and I'd use a lot of transformers to get the noise floor down. But one day we had an episode where I believe a snowcat ran over our cable, and I needed to make it work. And it actually took a 10-foot section out and turned it into dust. So my buddy who was doing the intercom side said, "I've got about 24 channels open here of audio." At that time, it was like 24-bit audio, but it was still. And I started transporting the important things that we needed to make the show work, program feeds back and forth and stuff. And that was the beginning of that. Once that happened, I never ran another piece of long cable again, because first of all, I got rid of all my hums and buzzes. It was stellar as far as quality went for PA. And we did that for many years, 6 years. And God, it got to the point where I was running, dang near half a mile sometimes with venues, and venues would be like 13 venues when I was doing summer X Games and like 8 venues when I was doing winter. So that eventually turned into, later the TV trucks said we're not going to use the Riedel. We all want to use RTS stuff. And that's when they took over my intercom, which took away my fiber optic audio backbone that I was using. And we moved into Dante. And I used several companies along the route over my 20 years. But the last company I was using, On Stage Audio, would always bring me very good fiber techs and very good intercom people and stuff like that. We used to do that. And I did that show for 20 years as well. I was the audio designer for Summer Winter X Games for 20 years, doing those shows and Great Outdoor Games, as I was saying, until it disappeared. And that's how I got the flavor for really large shows where 300,000 people show up, those type of things where I'm putting sound systems out covering areas of maybe a half a mile wide by a quarter mile deep, where, just giant PA systems, and working alongside a TV and making sure that stuff didn't interfere with their shows that they were recording. And eventually that turned into Red Bull. Later down the road, somewhere around 2013, that turned into Red Bull reaching out to me and CrossFit reaching out to me. And I was...
Well, let's hold that there for just a second. That's going to be the end of this first episode.
Sure.
Let's come back and talk about the Red Bull and what it turned into and all of that. So until then, folks, we'll be right back.
You're listening to It's Showtime, the Craig L. Hayes Show.